Hi, everybody. We are now going to continue the third part of Mercury retrograde. When Mercury is retrograde, and it started to go retrograde as of 1 in the morning, the 28th. So by this morning, Mercury will be retrograde. I'm going to explain what that means and what that is. I've already done part 1, part 2. This is part 3. When Mercury is in Virgo, or the 6th house, traversing the 6th house of Virgo, you have to reorganize your workspace. That's number 1. Number 2, you're going to reconnect with old friends and discuss personal issues or catch up on stuff. Mercury retrograde usually brings people from your past right back into your life. So that's very common. So be careful, be watchful of that. Number 3, you have to reconnect. You have to redo your routine. You have to rework. I know I'm doing the cue cards. Judy wants me to do the cue cards, so bear with me. You're going to have to rework your routine, okay? You have to rework your routine when you are, whatever worked. This Mercury retrograde might throw a wrench in the mix, and you might have to reinvent whatever it is you used to work before. You might have a different change in the routine, and you might have to adjust to it. Okay, and added responsibility may be thrown in the table, and you're gonna have to incorporate that into your routine, which means revamping your routine, and that is something that you have to look at with Mercury retrograde. Okay, if with the mix-up, you have to be careful with mix-up in communication at the workspace, or because Virgo rules the workforce. It rules the blue-collar worker, but it also rules office politics. So there may be mix-ups. The memo might not be signed, or someone might misinterpret the memo to mean something else. You have to be very careful in your language when you speak, or whatever you put on the email, because it could be misconstrued, and this can cause a problem in the teamwork if this happens in the workforce. And it absolutely will, because Virgo rules the workforce, the office. So be very, very careful of any mix-up or misunderstandings. Sometimes you might be too structured. Do you remember the sitcom, for those of you who are my age, Bob Newhart? The Bob Newhart show, of the 1970s, early 70s. You should YouTube it, online, and watch an episode too. And Bob Newhart is a typical Virgo, very perfunctory. Goes from home to work, and from work to home, and is pretty kind of boring, with a very sly sense of humor. I used to like that show. It's kind of a cute show, I'm not that type of Virgo at all. I got too much Leo and too much Aries, so I don't fit that model. But he was very structured. And if you remember that show, for those of you who are in your 40s, 50s, like myself, the people around him were kooky and crazy and quacky, and they were symbolic of the inner child that he was suppressing. So and what I mean to say by that is that if you're very rigid and if you're very structured, you might encounter chaos, and the chaos might be necessary to loosen you up and make you more humane. Okay, so that's one thing. Now, if with Mercury retrograde, particularly with Geminis and Virgos, and people with strong Virgo and Gemini moons, or Virgo and Gemini on the ascendant, you might suffer from pains and aches and muscle aches. It's time to exercise. If you haven't been exercising, you need to exercise, because that is going to help bring you back into shape. The Mercury rules the nervous system, but it also rules the circulatory system. So you need to be active during the retrograde, and don't fall into a slump, because Mercury is the winged god, the messenger of the gods, and in our solar system, Mercury is the closest to the sun and has the strongest orbital speed around the sun. So it kind of fits the mythology. So flow with him. Otherwise, this retrograde is going to be tough and rough. And it's in Taurus, and Taurus is a slow moving sign, and just with the tail just swapping the mosquitoes out, laying there in the nice hot heat, So Just like the lion, these are animals that like to just graze in the African tundra. So you may be slow moving, but your mind is going to be racing, and it might need to, because sometimes even the Taurian needs to get a little jump in his step, With Mercury retrograde, you have to, again, we talk about the circulatory system. If you're going to go into a diet or start a diet, because Mercury rules diets and diet regimes, don't do it now. Wait until the retrograde is over. Okay? What you can do now is plan until, you can go and actually do it when it actually goes direct. Drink plenty of water. And that's going to really, really do a number in loosening up the joints. The more water you drink, the more the body uses it to produce interstitial fluid, synovial fluid, which lubricates the joints of the body and all that kind of stuff. So make sure you drink your water. With Mercury retrograde in Taurus in the 7th house, this is the house of relationships, the house of marriage, the house of cooperation, and also the house where you may have to make some readjustments, not only in business, but also within your personal, interpersonal life with your romantic partner or lifetime partner or wife or girlfriend or fiance, and also on a platonic level, it's the house of open enemies. The 7th house and the sign that sits in the 7th house is where your enemies are. Okay, in the birth chart, in the natal chart. But as a transit of Mercury in this house, you might encounter enemies where there may not have been. That is possible. You might start a new job, and in that job develop all kinds of enemies. Or you might be doing very well for many, many years, and suddenly during the Mercury retrograde, there's a new boss and a new changing in the company or department, and these people may not be as friendly, and they might plot your demise. These things can happen on the Mercury retrograde in the 7th house in Taurus. Okay, so don't be surprised if you have to go through a compromising process. That's very important. Don't start a new business venture, nor do you select a partner during a Mercury retrograde traversing this house. It's going to be disastrous, and you might have to rescind and stuff later when Mercury goes direct that would have been avoided had you not started it in the first place, because Mercury retrograde tends to waste your time, very similar to Saturn retrograde, who, by the way, is also retrograde, and we'll talk about that in another series. So be very careful. No marriage or proposal or engagement should take place at this time during the retrograde. Wait. It's a good time and a good opportunity to reevaluate if you were making the right decision or not. Okay? And if you are in business for yourself and you're looking towards a third venue or company, depending on what kind of corporation you have, and you want to do, if you work for the city and you have a contract with the city and you deal with vendors and you deal with a type of third party intermediaries, they fall in the 7th house, and if Mercury goes retrograde, there may be problems with the in-between vendors and different bids and things like that. So you have to be very careful. Okay, and now we are going to go into Mercury in the 8th house. In this house of shared resources, Mercury here offers you the chance to find out if you are getting in or giving your fair share in a relationship. Okay, it may be to redistribute the wealth, renew your insurance, or check when your insurance runs out. Avoid taking out a loan or pay off your debts and taxes. Okay, there may be issues or delays with jointly held resources during this time. It is not the best time to take out a mortgage or a loan or invest in a new business either. Okay, sexual issues, because we're dealing with the 8th house of sex, and this is the house of Scorpio. There may need to be a discussion about whether there may be a lack of sex, or maybe because it's Mercury and Mercury rules communication. There's some people that like to communicate when they have sex. Maybe that's something that your partner doesn't like, and maybe you are talking too much in sex, or maybe you're being role playing and it's out of hand. There has to be more of a communication in this respect. Divine intimacy can be achieved through sharing your thoughts, meaning that if you just have sex but you don't talk, that might be as degrading as having sex in a way that your partner may not like. So communication during and or before, but certainly after sex, should be encouraged to make sure that you know on a constant basis what your partner is feeling and if things are going okay. You don't want people to simulate sex. You want them to really get involved in the sexual act if their heart is really in it. If they're just going through the motions because they're angry and because there's a disconnect in the sense of communication, that's going to come up in the retrograde if Mercury is in the 8th house. In this house, it doesn't really matter the sign, but because it is in Taurus now, and if Taurus happens to sit in that house in your birth chart, then it will especially be of an importance, because Taurus is the opposite of Scorpio, that polarity. So sex is a very important part of life for both signs of Scorpio and Taurus. So that's something that you have to be careful of. Now, it's very important to recall previous intimate relationships in order to understand better your preferences and needs. So if you know what you like, then that should not be a problem. Okay? When you have Mercury retrograde in the 9th house, re-examine what you believe about the world as Mercury backs up into the 9th house. Your beliefs create what you experience. It's time to consider the future. What you do now affects the outcome. What's your overall philosophy of life? What do you plan to do? Are you living it? Okay. This house is also connected to the morals and ethics. So maybe you might need to be a good guy if you were a bad guy, and kind of slow down your evilness. During this transit, you may be called upon to reassess what the truth really means. Is it your truth or is it somebody else's truth? And how sincere are you? This is the house of Sagittarius, where Jupiter rules and is currently retrograde. So that's something that may affect Sagittarians along the way, because that's important. This is a good time to resit exams previously failed or go back into education. So if you haven't been in school for a while, maybe this is a time that you can go back. Use this time to revise, to edit writing, to rewrite and proofread your work. Explore books that make you think differently about the world. You may have a sense that you have lost the big picture somewhere along the line. Take some time to visualize where you want to be. Take that time to do that. Okay, you may find yourself needing to revisit a place. Generally, however, travel plans at this time need to be triple checked. Be prepared for delays, cancellations, canceled flights, and roadblocks. Mercury will like you to see where you are so you can be clearer about where you want to go. And if you're constantly in the move mentally and psychologically, you're not going to have that time to be able to reflect. And that's why these retrogrades are so important on a psychological level in the personality base. Sometimes we just have to stand still. The 9th house is also associated with the concept of faith. Your faith in yourself or in a higher being may be called into question. Faith adhered to without question can bind you. Keep asking the big questions. Never stop. Never settle. Very important. With Mercury in the 10th house, take care of old business. Finish the job you started. A change in status can sometimes be indicated by this transit from promotion to job loss. So it can cut either way. If you are self-employed, take care with your new contracts and clients. This may be the time to reconsider how you market yourself and the clients you want to work with. Revamp your public image. Okay. Alternately, a great way to make sure the use of Mercury in the 10th house is done right is to take a holiday from work. Spend some time at home and recharge your batteries. Okay, the key word is redefine, reassemble, reappoint, resign, retire, or reorient, or reinvent yourself. With Mercury in the 11th house, reconnect, regroup, reconvene, and reform. Don't be a fanatic and don't go overboard. And with Mercury in the 12th house, redeem, release, recharge, reconsecrate, and repent. Clear your mind and heal your mind and allow new thoughts to allow the new you to reemerge into a new personality or a new orientation of the ego. Okay? And that's what you should do. And thank you very much. That concludes this series of the Mercury retrograde throughout the 12 houses.